Hey, so glad you're with us for the Wednesday edition of the Martini Lunch. We're glad you're with us. Grab a stool. So much to talk about today. We are going to be talking about the actual push. I don't know how big this is, but it was at least mentioned by a national political reporter that some people want Al Gore to run for president in 2028. I don't know if we got somehow stuck in a DeLorean somewhere, but nonetheless, that's what people want, at least some people who watched him speak earlier this week. We'll also take a look at President Trump's response to the talk of an affordability problem. It's a little bit different, in fact, a lot different than what Senator Sheehy had to say in his Wall Street Journal column that we talked about yesterday. And, of course, the big news from Tennessee, Aftyn Behn is not coming to Congress. So that is delicious news that we'll dig into in just a second. But first, Noble Gold. Yeah, there's good news there, too, where if you're looking to diversify your portfolio and maybe look down towards retirement and a gold IRA, there's no better place to go than Noble Gold Investment. I've spoken with Colin Plume and the whole team there at Noble Gold. They're very knowledgeable, very calm. They'll inform you about all your different options, and they'll give you the best possible information so you can make the decision.
The team at Noble Gold knows the markets, they know the metals, they know the strategies. They're not interested in hype. They just want to give you honest, fact-based insights and clear options.
Yeah, exactly. So before you check out for the holidays, do one smart thing for your future. Go to noblegoldinvestments.com/3ML and download their free gold and silver guide. When you open a qualified account, you'll receive 10 1-ounce commemorative silver holiday coins. Visit noblegoldinvestments.com/3ML. That's noblegoldinvestments.com/3ML. All right, Jim. Well, it finally came. Yesterday was Election Day in Tennessee 7. We did a lot of martinis on Aftyn Behn, and she deserved all of them. Hating Nashville, hating country music, hating the bachelorette parties, although some people in Nashville can sympathize with that one. She hates police, wanted to abolish police, doesn't like the nuclear family, thinks women shouldn't have kids, all this sort of stuff. And ultimately, it was still in what had been a plus 22 district for Republicans just last year, a single-digit race, even according to Republican internals. So there was definitely concern that this could possibly slip away from Republicans. It did not happen, thankfully. Looks like in the final margin, just under a 9-point win for Republican Matt Van Epps, who, by the way, seems like a very solid candidate. A veteran, seems to be solid on all the issues. But when you're running against a crazy person, the crazy person tends to get a lot of the attention. Yet, interestingly, Jim, Nashville itself, which is part of this district, not all of it certainly, otherwise the Democrats would have won. Democrats had a plus 38 in Nashville in 24, plus 58. So even if you say you hate your city, if Democrats are fired up to vote, they're going to show up for you anyway. But congrats to Matt Van Epps, and thank goodness Aftyn Behn's not coming to Washington.
You know, all over Nashville, you could see Democrats marching to the polls and chanting, "We hate ourselves too! Hate us! Hate us!" You know. Look, this is good news that Republicans won the seat. And look, if they had lost, this would have been absolute panic, Katie bar the door, every bit as bad. It is a single-digit margin, but just barely a single-digit margin. And I think based on this, if you're a Republican, yes, you have reasons to worry about the midterms. We'll talk a bit about that in our next martini. But this is really not that bad an outcome. And the thing we should keep in mind, special House elections tend to have much lower turnout than usual, and weird things happen in them. Remember, for a little while, we were worried about Matt Gaetz' seat. We were worried about Mike Waltz's seat down in Florida. Republicans won both of them. They won by much shorter margins than usual. A whole bunch of people who usually vote in midterm elections and presidential year elections don't show up in special elections. This is how you end up with Republicans winning the House seat in Hawaii a couple of years back, I guess 2010, so it was more than a couple of years back. They won Anthony Weiner's seat up in New York City for one term. And then, of course, it was a very Democratic district. So, recognize weird things happen in special elections, and they're not necessarily precursors to what's going to happen here. But, as you pointed out, it wasn't just, fairly darn Republican district. This was a sane and normal Republican candidate against probably one of the top 5, top 10 craziest Democratic candidates we've ever seen, with just oodles of opposition research and, bad comments and going on to MS Now, not MSNBC, and having to explain it away and doing a very poor job of that. you look at this, it would, in normal circumstances, you'd like to think the Republican would win, not just by the usual 20-some point margin, but maybe by an even greater margin because of the craziness of the Democratic candidate. That didn't happen here. So, again, I think there's some reason for Republicans to be worried about the midterms. This election result by itself is really not a particularly big factor in that.
No, I think you're right. If it had been a point or two, it probably would have been more alarming. But you're right about the electorate just looking different in these types of special elections. But now you're having a little bit of a debate on the left where some people are saying, if we had nominated someone just a little more normal, we might have been able to actually pick off this seat. Other people are saying, no, you tried someone slightly more normal last year and they lost by 22. Aftyn Behn is the way you need to go.
The electorate wants crazies who hate where they're going to represent. So
exactly. But who's actually sounding the alarm on this is our good friend Dana Perino over at The Five, who is saying, look, Mamdani's not the outlier anymore. Aftyn Behn is not the outlier anymore. The energy on the left is on the far left, and that's who we're going to see in race after race next year.
I've said from the beginning, since Mamdani was on the scene, this is coming to a city near you. This is where the energy is. Whoever is in power in the White House typically has a hard time in that first midterm. AOC has figured out, okay, she's picking people. Matt Van Epps, you could not find a better candidate. He checks he's an amazing American, this patriotic guy. He's willing to serve, and yet it's this close. I do think that he will win.
I hope he does.
But the fact that it is close is a warning sign to Republicans everywhere that this Democratic energy from the far left is not going to stop. And it won't be Jessica necessarily, but you'll have Democrats. Maybe Harold will say, she's not a real Democrat. No, this is actually where the party is going. She campaigned with AOC the weekend before the election. That tells me that they're not worried about her.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And if voters are not happy with incumbents, the more the Democrats start putting up people like this, the more normal they're going to seem, even though they're not normal at all. And so they'll be willing to take a flyer on some of these people, and it's going to be crazy. So Republicans got to be ready.
Yeah, look, if you are a not well-known going into a race, one of your first challenges is getting people to know who you are and what you want to do. And unfortunately, the media environment we are in, normal candidates don't get attention. White papers, detailed policy proposals do not get attention. I intend to murder people on those pedibars or whatever you call the bicycle things where people run around. That will get people. That's very bad, very wrong. People should not do that. But that's the sort of thing that gets people sit up and take notice and goes viral and all that stuff. And all of a sudden people know who you are. And there's some percentage of people out there, particularly hard lefties, who are like, oh, this person is crazy and hates people. I like him. And let me donate money. And that's what fueled a whole bunch of these candidacies coast to coast. So there are going to be people who are going to try to run the AOC Mamdani playbook. Thankfully, it won't work in a lot of districts. But this is a formula for the additional radicalization of the Democratic Party further to the left.
Yeah, they want fighters, Jim. They want people who will resist, and the current people aren't resisting enough, so they want resistier people. And it's just not really happening. So, well, congratulations to Matt Van Epps. Looking forward to what he can do in the new Congress. Should be sworn in fairly soon. The only seat still not filled, Sylvester Turner, who died in March. That runoff's not till January 31st down there in Texas. So we'll finally have 435. Assuming everyone stays alive until then in the House of Representatives. So still to come is Al Gore possibly going to run for president, and also President Trump's thoughts on affordability. And later, a very important message about someone very special to us here at the 3 Martini Lunch. So don't miss that as well. But for the moment, let's talk about your health and specifically your liver. And let's be honest, modern life is rough on our bodies. Processed foods, stress, environmental elements, late nights, your liver is working overtime to filter all of that out. And if you've been feeling sluggish or just off, your liver might be trying to tell you something. Well, you can say something to your liver. Hey, let's get you healthy as possible. And that's what you can do with Dose, a clinically backed liver health supplement taken in a daily 2-ounce shot and tastes great, just like fresh squeezed orange juice.
Your liver processes everything you consume and performs more than 500 daily functions. We're talking about energy production, digestion, fat metabolism, vitamin storage. And when your liver is overworked, you're going to feel it. So when you start drinking Dose daily, you can start you'll feel the difference pretty darn quickly. You're going to reduce that sluggishness. You're going to get rid of those midday crashes. You're going to support your metabolism, and it can even aid your daily digestion.
So if you are ready to give your liver the support it deserves, head to dosedaily.co/3ml or enter 3ml to get 35% off the first month of your subscription. Your body does so much for you. Let's do something for it. That's dosedaily.co/3ml for 35% off your first month's subscription. Well, hopefully you were with us yesterday, and our good martini yesterday was Montana Senator Tim Sheehy pointing out that, yes, our inflation problems are largely the effects of the Biden-Harris administration, especially 21, 22, and that time, but people are still feeling the pinch because in many cases those costs haven't gone down. The Trump administration, for the most part, over the first several months of this term, have been somewhere between 2.5% and 3%, which is way better than Biden, but 2% or below is where you definitely want to be. And so people are still feeling the pinch. And he's, like we said yesterday, talking about deregulation, price transparency, and other things that legislatively could get done to help people from a Republican perspective instead of just throwing money at it from the Democratic perspective. Well, yesterday, President Trump had a cabinet meeting, and the issue came up in a question. And President Trump had a very different take on the affordability problem.
And, there's this fake narrative that the Democrats talk about, affordability. They just say the word. It doesn't mean anything to anybody. They just say it. Affordability. I inherited the worst inflation in history. There was no affordability. Nobody could afford anything. The prices were massively high. Do you remember when we took over eggs? You did a great job on that, Madam Secretary. Agriculture, Brooke. Eggs were 4 or 5 times higher than they had ever been. They said don't order eggs for Easter at the White House. And we ended up doing it, and we got the egg prices way down, lower than what they were before. But the word affordability is a con job by the Democrats. They say affordable. I watched the other day where some very low IQ congresswoman talked about affordability. She had no idea. Their prices were much higher.
Well, Jim, he's right about a couple of things. The Democrats are using it as a buzzword with no real concrete plans to improve it. They want to throw a bunch of money at it or put in price controls with grocery stores or rent control and things like that, which never end up working. They always make things worse. But the reason they keep using the buzzword is because people are feeling the pinch, and so people are responding to that even though the Democrats don't really have a plan to deal with it. But Republicans need to acknowledge, like Tim Sheehy, that people are still feeling the pinch, even if the year-over-year inflation numbers are doing better. The prices, in most cases, gas being an exception and eggs, like he said, being an exception, in many cases, still way too high for us.
Greg, if Senator Sheehy's op-ed in the Wall Street Journal yesterday was everything Republicans should be doing on the affordability issue, cost of living, inflation, things like that, everything the president just said is everything they should not be saying on this issue. He says he inherited the highest inflation of all time. True enough, if you're talking about the Biden inflation as a whole, peaked in 9%, above 9% actually in June of 2022. Really, most of the last year of Biden being in office, it was around 3%, which is still not good. Remember, we want it to be 2%, but 3% is considerably down some. So it's not. By the time Trump got into office, the rate had come down considerably. Secondly, since Trump's been in office, it's been between 2%. Usually, it's been around 3%, a little bit below, a little bit behind. Again, we've talked about in this podcast several times. The difference between 2% and 3% year-over-year inflation may not seem like much, but you project that out over 10 years. That's still going to be a considerable factor. He brings up eggs. The increase in the price of eggs was not necessarily reflective of inflation as a whole. It's primarily a response to bird flu. The U.S. government, by the way, bird flu is bad. We don't want people eating eggs with bird flu. Try not to catch bird flu. You would think that we would know about the problems of respiratory diseases in this country after the last couple of years. We might have had some experiences with that. But anyway, the previous administration set up a thing where they didn't want anybody eating any eggs from birds that had bird flu, and they didn't want anybody eating chickens that had bird flu, so they basically put up huge incentives. Cull your flocks at the first sign of bird flu. Unsurprised, you do that, and they also were willing, you can replace the equipment. The federal government was willing to pick up the check, so make sure that nobody felt any temptation to put out a chicken or an egg. I won't get into which one came first. A chicken or an egg that is, potentially exposed to bird flu. They prioritize public safety, which is, most people say, oh, good, all right, glad you're doing that. You kind of created this perverse incentive for, farms to cull as much as possible. If there's any, even the most remote chance could have been exposed, we get rid of it. You end up having fewer chickens. Surprise, surprise, you have fewer eggs. This is what caused the egg shortage. This is what caused egg prices to go up. The administration changed the policies, big chicken, mommy chickens and daddy chickens, or I guess roosters, they love each other very much. They create new baby chickens. The new baby chickens grow up and start laying eggs themselves. Lo and behold, we have more chickens, and that brings egg prices down. The administration can take credit for this, but this is not really a broad general inflation thing. This is specifically due to the issues surrounding bird flu. Third of all, don't run around saying affordability is a con job. And again, this is what happens when Trump speaks off the cuff. He remembers things he saw on television. He thinks it's ridiculous. Look, the American people, Trump has run in 3 presidential elections, and he's won 2 of them. He's not eligible to run again. But up until there's a Republican nominee in the year 2028, Donald Trump's going to be the leader of the Republican Party, the face of the Republican Party. When Americans think of Republicans, they're going to think of Donald Trump. It has not been an issue for Trump in his previous campaigns that he's one of the richest Americans out there, that he grew up rich by any typical standard. He's been rich his entire life. He's fought bankruptcies, has had time to think about it. But Donald Trump does not shop for his own groceries. It's been a very, very long time since he's shopped for any groceries. Donald Trump does not pump his own gas. It's been a very long time since he's done that, right? At some point, Democrats are going to argue Republicans don't understand about the problems you're having paying for your groceries and paying for your gas because they are led by a president for whom this is all theoretical. He's never done any of this stuff. And I think it's going to resonate. If the Republican message can't be the affordability is a con job. The argument you should make is yes, we inherited a terrible situation from the previous administration. The cost of living in this country is far too high. And the way you reduce prices is you increase supply. Demand is going to be what's going to be. We are going to make more supply so there's more competition so that prices come down. That is the message. And here are the policies we are doing that he laid out in that op-ed. That's what Republicans need to be doing. Please, Mr. President, stop going off the cuff and insisting that affordability, because yes, affordability is a real word. You can look it up in the dictionary.
Yeah, like he said, if you can reduce the cost of production and the cost that it takes to transport your good to the store, you're going to bring prices down. It's really on the margins. There's not a ton that the federal government can do, but you at least have to acknowledge that the issue is very real for people, because the Biden administration, that was their argument for a couple of years there. You don't know how good you've got it.
Yeah, greenflation. They're putting more air in the Doritos bag. And let's also point out tariffs do not make anything cheaper. Tariffs make anything that's imported cheaper, and anything made here in this country that includes components cheap, make it more expensive. So that's a factor. Now we'll see what the Supreme Court says about tariffs, and if they instantly rescind all the Trump tariffs, maybe you'll see prices come down on a bunch of stuff. So it's possible the Supreme Court will save the Trump administration from itself. But if that does not happen, Trump lowered tariffs on coffee because he recognized the price of coffee had gotten so high. Well, first of all, on behalf of Coffee Drinkers America, thank you, Mr. President. But maybe you shouldn't have raised them in the first place. So, that's, again, the ministry. Do Democrats in the media try to create problems for this administration? Yes, but very often a chunk of the administration's problems were created by themselves.
Yeah, and there's certain things that are getting better. The price of gas, and they tried at least to cut spending there for a while with Doge, and that was a rocky pattern. So, but that's in the rearview mirror for a lot of people. They don't expect miracles, most people from Washington, but they do expect you to acknowledge what they're going through. And I think was very sensitive to that and very smart about that in the last campaign. Working at McDonald's and all that, it kind of showed a blue collar aspect to it, and so it's not necessarily a condemnation of your policies at this point. Hopefully things will get better, but you can't just pretend it's not happening. That's never going to work for you.
Greg, very often we tell our audience and our listeners and our viewers, do not look to the federal government for miracles, except around Christmas time, because, Theo, you ask for miracles, I give you the FBI.
Absolutely.
You were setting that up with that reference, weren't you? The moment you said the word miracles, the light bulb went off in my...
Yes, and if you don't know what Jim's talking about,
it's that time of year.
The world's greatest Christmas movie has been out there for 37 years, and you can watch it this holiday season. And so, all right, in just a moment, we'll be talking about a good friend of the podcast and also a really old guy who some people want to be president of the United States. I don't think it's going to happen, but we'll talk about it in just a second. But meanwhile, if you're as old as Al Gore, you might have a few lines on the face, and this would be the perfect time of the year to address that, either for yourself or someone that you love. Because between colder weather and the holidays, it can feel like nonstop stress on your system, and that's why OneSkin is the answer. And in addition to all the fantastic aspects of OneSkin, including their patented OS1 peptide, the first ingredient proven to target senescent cells, the root cause of wrinkles, crepiness, and the loss of elasticity, which are all key signs of skin aging. Their results have now been validated in 5 different clinical studies.
You know, Greg, I bet a lot of our listeners and viewers out there probably are like, I've tried certain skin products, but I find them harsh and irritating, like Al Gore. Well, certified safe for sensitive skin, OneSkin products are free from more than 1,500 harsh or irritating ingredients. They are dermatologist tested, and they have been awarded the National Eczema Association Seal of Acceptance, otherwise known as the Good NEA, with powerful results without all the side effects.
Yeah, and I really like the sunscreen. I've talked about that before. Very, very effective. Also, OneSkin wants you to know they've just launched their limited edition holiday sets, including the Nightly Rewind gift set, which is one of those rare gifts that's both impressive and genuinely useful. So for a limited time, try OneSkin for 15% off using the code 3ML at oneskin.co/3ML. And after you purchase, they'll ask you where you heard about them. So please support the 3 Martini Lunch and tell them that we sent you. That's code 3ML at oneskin.co/3ML. All right, Jim, on to our crazy martini now. And earlier this week, there was a conference call with a bunch of people jumping on this conference call, Democratic side, encouraging people to get out the vote for Aftyn Behn. That by itself should disqualify you for any future political office. But one of these people on the call was that Tennessee political legend, former Vice President Al Gore, and Ben Jacobs, who is a pretty well-known political reporter. Unfortunately for him, he's probably best known for being allegedly body slammed by the current governor of Montana out there a few years ago. But he says in the Zoom chat of the closing rally for Aftyn Behn, there are a lot of commenters who want Al Gore to run for president in 2028 as he speaks. Now, obviously, the audience in the Zoom chat for the closing rally of Aftyn Behn is not probably a huge group that's representative of the national Democrats. But, Jim, I think what you would hear from Al Gore is, I actually did run and did win the presidency in the year 2000. Unfortunately, it was taken away from me by the United States Supreme Court. And so I was also not going to want anybody to check his predictions in his documentary, The Inconvenient Truth, none of which have come true in that calamitous area. So Al Gore, who first ran for president in 1988, launched that campaign before he even turned 40, would be 80 in 2028. So I don't think this is going to happen. But since the Andrew Cuomo thing didn't work out for me, I'm really hoping Al Gore gives it a shot.
For listeners who are saying, did Jim and Greg pick this topic just so Greg could do the Al Gore impression? Yes, as Marv Albert would say. But it is kind of interesting and funny. I started thinking, but first of all, Al Gore is 77 years old. So by Democratic presidential candidate standards, he's young. Tanned, rested, divorced, and ready. So it's strange. With one, like, oh, Al Gore is still around, and Al Gore is still being active in Democratic politics. I would say, look, we have a right of center audience. But if I said to you, who would gun to your head, you absolutely must have a Democrat become president of the United States. Would you rather have Al Gore, Kamala Harris, or Tim Walz?
Oh.
That's a revolting buffet table there. But I suspect a decent number of right would say, look at that, squint and wince and say, I guess Al Gore. We think Al Gore is wrong about a lot of things, but you figure in terms of intellectual candle power, he could run circles around Harris and Walz. No, that's not the highest bar to clear. But you look at a world in which Cory Booker, apparently recently married Cory Booker, congratulations, thinks the party is clamoring for him to become the next president. Chris Murphy, right? There are a whole bunch of Democrats where you're like, you really? Mayor Pete? Really? These guys think they're ready to be a commander in chief of the Al Gore, if nothing else, he was vice president for 8 years. And before, he was he was one of the more prominent Democratic senators when Bill Clinton picked him. And so I just kind of look at that. I just kind of feel like it's not like you could say he had Dick Cheney gravitas. But you just kind of he was at least experienced, and he'd been more, hadn't been in the Senate for 20 minutes before he decided to run for president. And you look at, people say, oh, AOC should run. And, the only reason Mamdani isn't running because he wasn't born in this country. And, look, that didn't stop Barack Obama. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding, everyone. Stop. Too many people say that I'm behind the birth certificates conspiracy when I argued when I argued the opposite. But, when you're right of center, you get these kinds of things stuck to you. But look, is Al Gore going to run for the 2028 nomination? No. Bernie Sanders would tell you he's too young. But I kind of look back and I feel like the Democrats of a generation ago, as much as we disagreed with them, had a little more experience in Washington, had a better sense of how the government worked. And basically, when Al Gore ran for president in 2000, you did not believe that he was running because he really wanted a gig on cable news. You didn't get a feeling that he was running because he wanted a book deal. You didn't, he did not see his presidential campaign as a stepping stone to a greater form of celebrity. And I don't feel like that's the case, you can say, for a lot of presidential candidates these days. And so, there's a, I don't want to say seriousness to Al Gore, but we have some real lightweight clowns that are likely to run for the Democratic nomination in 2028. And it would be kind of nice to see Al Gore run out there and just, slap them around as the old man of the group and tell them, back when you were in diapers. Like, when I say these were in diapers, keep in mind, some of these people were in diapers, in the Bush administration, and I mean the second one, not the first one. That's how, young and fresh some of these Democratic options are.
Jim, you've been way too nice to Al Gore. His environmental radicalism alone is enough to put him in the camp of some of these people. And then, of course, his bellowing purple face.
He played on our fears.
He betrayed us. Yeah. And just, I think he's one of these guys that has pretty much drifted along the leftward lurch of the party. I think the Al Gore you would get in 2028 is very different than the Al Gore that you got in 2000, and that one wasn't any good. So it's not heading in the right direction. But if he does get in, that was a pretty young field in 1988. Maybe Dick Gephardt, Jesse Jackson, Gary Hart, Bruce Babbitt. I mean, let's just get the whole band back together and do it all over again. Dukakis is still alive. Do it. Let's do it.
Greg, I saw this yesterday. I want to double check because somebody said they were all born the same year, and I don't think that's the case. But Bill Clinton was born in the 1940s, correct?
Correct.
George W. Bush was born in the 1940s.
Correct.
Obama was 50s?
61.
61, all right. Trump was born in the 40s.
Yes. Bush,
Biden
Clinton,
was born in the 40s. Yes. And, so next year might be the first year since when you and I were in high school, with the exception of Obama, that we did not have a president who was born in the 1940s.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, W. Bush, Clinton, and Trump are all born in the summer of 1946. So, yes, we will probably not have the next president elected who was born in the 1940s, much to the chagrin of Al Gore. And I'm guessing we're going to probably skip right over the 1950s.
Yes.
But we'll see. We'll see who gets
in Generation X, we're never getting a president. I just let you know, But I also point out, I will not be like my colleague Michael Brennan Doherty and call for the public execution of baby boomers by hanging, which he mentioned at the National Review Institute event down in Palm Beach. And let me tell you, our demographics love that. But nonetheless, I'm just going to point out, baby boomers, it may be time to ride off into the sunset and let some younger generations get to be president for a while.
I think that's probably likely to happen based on the field we've got right now. We could have two nominees born in the 80s. Talk about a jump from the 1940s. Okay, just a couple minutes left in our podcast here. And Jim, whenever you're gone, you know this, there's a great stable of guest hosts that we draw from to fill your seat as best as we can. And one of those is the great John Gabriel. Spent a lot of years as editor-in-chief at Ricochet. He's a columnist. He's the king of stuff, the undisputed king of stuff. And the last couple of times that I asked him if he could fill in for you, one was when you were in India and one was last month. And he's like, I'm sorry, my back pain, just can't handle it. The second time he's like, I really can't even get out of bed right now. And I'm like, man, I hope you can get some answers. Well, last night on X, Twitter, he gave a very thorough update on his health. The back pain did not get any better. And eventually went in for further testing. And just a few days before Thanksgiving, he was originally told that he had cancer in the bones that had probably spread from other places and he might only have a few weeks left. Now it looks like it's actually a diagnosis of multiple myeloma, which is still not good, but there's been a tremendous amount of progress in treating multiple myeloma in the past couple of decades, and so what used to be a grim diagnosis is still not great, but he, the prognosis is now years, or if not even decades, and so he's still in a tremendous amount of pain, and he's going to be having to go through chemo and a bunch of other stuff. But we're certainly praying for John. He's one of the great guys. He coined the term that Gavin Newsom is the Patrick Bateman of American politics. He's got a great wit. He's really smart, really well read. And at the end of his message on X last night, he says, "All I can ask for is your prayers, and a whole lot of them. They've made a big difference. Thank you." So, John, we are praying for you, and we hope we hear great news from you real soon. We love you, man.
Greg, I think I first met John Gabriel at one of the blogger conferences back during the Obama years. And, as great as he is on this program, as great as he is on Twitter, when I met him in person, I think what shocked me the most was that he has a chin. Because for a very long time he had the avatar, the picture of himself drinking coffee, and you didn't see the bottom half of his face. No, everything you said is absolutely true. Just a funny, witty, charming, delightful guy. As I was describing earlier today, the kind of people who's got a good heart, good head, good mind, and a good soul. And so there's a lot, prayers, thoughts, we're with you. I also pointed out today, about a year ago, John wrote a book called Sink the Rising Sun. Mm-hmm. It is historical fiction. It's about World War II after the Pearl Harbor attacks. I put it into my Amazon cart today, and this doesn't really change his condition, but I think it will put a smile on John's face if he has a whole bunch of sales, and if everybody says, "This is our way of supporting you. This is our way of saying we're with you, buddy." And every author loves book sales, and so it's a little thing. Do you know somebody in your life who'd like a historical fiction book for Christmas or Hanukkah or whatever you celebrate? Great. Maybe here's the thing. Let me tell you something about authors. We love it when you buy our books. We like it when you read them. Reading them is a nice little bonus, but if you buy them, that's often very nice. So that's what I'm doing. If you feel like, you can find it on Amazon. It's available Kindle, it's available audiobook, available paperback. That's what I'm doing to kind of say, hey, John, I'm with you, hoping for you, praying for you here. And hopefully this has a happy ending. But one of the worst has happened to one of the best. And listeners, if you can keep John in your prayers, I'm sure he will very much appreciate it.
Yeah, he most certainly will. Again, it's called Sink the Rising Sun. I've actually read it. It's a great book. You're not only going to put a smile on his face, you're actually going to enjoy the book a lot. So highly encourage that. And yes, as John suggested, please continue to pray for him. And if we see any updates, we'll be sure to pass them along. So, Jim, on that unfortunate note, we say goodbye for today, and we'll be back again on Thursday. See you then.
See you tomorrow, Greg.
Jim Garrity, National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks so much for being with us today. Please be sure to subscribe to the 3 Martini Lunch podcast. If you don't already, tell your friends about us as well. Thanks also for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Please keep those coming. Get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch podcast. Follow us both on X. He's at Jim Garrity. I'm at Greg Corombos. And don't forget to follow us also at 3 Martini Lunch on Facebook and Instagram. Have a great Wednesday. Join us again Thursday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.